I never thought my life could unravel so quickly, or so completely. At 27, I stood at what I thought was the pinnacle of success. The kind of moment where you feel like every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every hour of overtime had finally paid off. I was standing in front of my dream house, a gorgeous two-story colonial with a wraparound porch, the kind of house you see in those Hallmark movies. White shutters, a brick path leading up to the front door, and a backyard big enough to host the birthday parties for the kids I had been dreaming about. Every brick, every window, every inch of it was mine. I made it happen. My name is Robin Mitchell, and I had clawed my way here. After 5 grueling years as an investment manager at Sterling and Associates, a field dominated by men who didn't think someone like me could keep up, I had finally saved enough for a down payment that would make most people's jaws drop. I wasn't handed this. I built it. I earned it. "This is it, Derek," I whispered, my voice trembling with excitement as I squeezed my husband's hand. We stood together at the foot of the driveway, soaking it all in, the house that symbolized our future. Derek looked at me with those familiar warm brown eyes, the corners crinkling as he smiled. "It's perfect, babe. You did good." Those words, "you did good," stuck with me. That was one of the things I loved about him. Derek had always been my biggest supporter. Never once had he made me feel like my ambition was too much or that my success threatened his manhood. He was a high school teacher, a job he loved, though it didn't exactly come with a 6-figure salary. But he took pride in it. And when I told him I wanted to buy the house on my own and put it in my name, he didn't even flinch. "You earned it," he had said simply. "Besides, I'm saving for our future kids' college funds. We're a team, right? A team." That was our mantra. We weren't like those other couples I knew, where money drove wedges between them. We understood each other. At least, that's what I thought. I hugged him that day, so tight, breathing him in, feeling lucky beyond words. Most men would have let their ego get in the way, but not Derek. He was different. Or at least, I believed he was. 1 week later, we moved in. I still remember the feeling of unlocking that door for the first time, my hand trembling slightly as I turned the key. The smell of fresh paint mixed with the promise of new beginnings. The sound of our laughter echoing through the empty rooms as we planned where we'd put the couch, the dining table, the nursery furniture, someday. For bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen with marble countertops that made me feel like I had finally made it. And that backyard, I could already picture the summer barbecues, the kids running around with sticky popsicle fingers, and Derek chasing them with the garden hose. I thought I had everything. That first evening, we sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset bleed into the horizon, sipping wine, talking about our future. We talked about painting the walls a soft sage green, planting hydrangeas by the mailbox, and turning one of the spare rooms into an office for me. But the nursery, that was the room we kept coming back to. It was just an empty room with cream-colored walls and a single window overlooking the backyard, but to us, it held so much more. It was a promise. A dream waiting to be realized. Later that night, lying in our new bed, listening to Derek's steady breathing beside me, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. True, unshakable peace. I closed my eyes, believing this was the start of our forever. But if I had known what was coming, if I had seen even a glimpse of the betrayal waiting just around the corner, I would have run. I would have burned that house to the ground before I ever put my name on it. Because the thing about dreams is, they can turn into nightmares before you even realize you're trapped inside one. Have you ever felt completely blindsided by someone you trusted? Comment 111 if you know that pain. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment when I made my first mistake. It wasn't when I found them in my bed, that was the end of the story. My mistake happened months before, at that dinner table, when Derek lied to his parents and claimed the house I bought was his. That was the first time I betrayed myself for him. But I didn't see it that way then. I saw it as compromise. Teamwork. Marriage. Derek had always been good at making things sound reasonable. He was a high school teacher, and while his salary was nothing to brag about, he had a steady, respectable job. He took pride in his work, and I respected that about him. We always knew I would be the one bringing home more money, it was just the reality of our careers. But I believed we made up for that difference with support, love, and balance. At least, that's what I thought. From the beginning, I let myself believe that what we had was rare. He wasn't intimidated by my success. He never made me feel guilty for my long hours or my ambition. He would tell me he was proud of me, and when he said it, I believed him. He would rub my shoulders after a 14-hour day and joke that he was married to the smartest woman in the city. I felt seen. I felt valued. But Derek was also the kind of man who needed to be admired. Not just by me, by everyone. And his parents, Martha and George, were his biggest fans. They doted on him. Martha would beam with pride when she talked about how Derek was the first in their family to go to college. George would tell anyone who'd listen that his son was a good man, a provider. When Derek and I started dating, they welcomed me with open arms. I was practically part of the family before we even got engaged. I loved them for it. Martha's pot roast became my favorite meal. George always made me laugh with his bad jokes. They treated me like a daughter. But now I see that their acceptance was conditional, it hinged on Derek being the golden boy, the strong provider. And my role? I was supposed to be the grateful wife who supported him in that image. My own parents were nothing like that. My mother was sharp-tongued and critical. My father was quiet, but his silence always felt like disapproval. I was their responsible daughter, the one who had her life together. My younger sister, Emily, was the opposite. She was the dreamer, the artist, the fragile one. Emily floated through life, while I held everything together. And Mom made sure I knew it. I was the capable one, but that didn't come with affection. It came with expectations. Emily could fail, and she'd be comforted. If I stumbled, I was reminded that I knew better. Even as adults, that dynamic never changed. When I got promoted, my mom would say, "Well, of course, you did, you're the responsible one." When Emily got a part-time job painting murals, it was celebrated like she'd won the Nobel Prize. I used to tell myself it didn't bother me. But it did. So when Derek's parents loved me, unconditionally, or so I thought, it filled a hole I didn't even know I had. I was desperate to keep that approval, so when Derek squeezed my hand under the dinner table and claimed my house as his, I let it happen. It wasn't even a full second of hesitation. It was instinctual. I smiled and nodded like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was the first crack. I remember barely tasting the pot roast I once adored. Derek described his down payment, the countless hours he spent looking for the right place, and how he had finally found the perfect home for us. Martha clutched her chest, tears forming in her eyes. George slapped Derek on the back, pride radiating from his face. No one even looked at me. I was just the woman lucky enough to marry such a man. When we got home that night, I confronted him. "What the hell was that, Derek? You know that's not true." He ran his hands through his hair, a nervous tic I had learned early in our relationship. I know. But you don't understand. My dad. He's old school. He wouldn't get it. He'd think I was less of a man if he knew you bought the house. So your pride is more important than the truth? My voice cracked, half angry, half hurt. It's not like that. It's just easier this way, for everyone. Please, Robin. It's not a big deal. We're a team, remember? That word. Team. He weaponized it so well. I sighed and let it go. I loved him. I didn't want to embarrass him. And maybe, deep down, I was still that little girl desperate for approval, from him, from his parents, from my own family. But that dinner was only the beginning. The lie took root, and it grew fast. When we visited my parents a week later, Derek did it again. "We bought a house," he said. I wanted Robin to have the home she deserves. My parents were impressed. Even my mother's sharp edges softened. My father clapped Derek on the back. And Emily, she smiled, but I saw it. That flicker of jealousy in her eyes. My sister had always dreamed of the perfect house, the perfect husband, the perfect life. And there I was, living it. Or so she thought. I swallowed my resentment again, letting the narrative cement itself. Derek, the provider. Derek, the man who gave me everything. The lie followed us into every conversation, every dinner, every party. We hosted friends in our new home, and Derek would lead them on grand tours, describing his vision for each room. He'd point out the fixtures I had chosen, the tile I had agonized over, and take credit for all of it. I would sip my wine, smile tightly, and say nothing. I convinced myself it didn't matter. We were happy. That's what mattered, right? But every time Derek told the story, it chipped away at something inside me. My accomplishment, something I had fought for, was slowly being erased. And worse, I was complicit. I let it happen because I thought keeping the peace was more important than my pride. Because I thought that's what being a good wife meant. I ignored the warning signs, the way Derek basked in the praise, the subtle digs at my workaholic schedule, the way his parents started viewing me as lucky to have him, rather than the woman who made our life possible. I ignored the way my sister's envy seemed to curdle into something darker. I ignored all of it because I believed we were a team. I loved them, Derek, his parents, even Emily. I thought my sacrifices were proof of that love. I thought that made me safe. I was wrong. Have you ever sacrificed so much for someone, only to feel like it meant nothing? Comment 222 below. The moment Emily stepped through our front door, suitcase in hand, I told myself this was the right thing to do. She was my sister. Family. She needed me. I was successful, stable. Taking her in was the least I could do. That's what I kept repeating in my head. Over and over. I didn't want to acknowledge the tight knot forming in my stomach when Derek immediately chimed in with, "Of course, she can stay. We've got plenty of room. She's family." There was an eagerness in his voice that felt off. I dismissed it at the time. I wanted to believe he was just being kind, supportive, the way he always had been. The same Derek who celebrated my promotion with a bottle of champagne and a handwritten note saying he was proud of me. The same Derek who once stayed up all night helping me prepare for a critical presentation, even though he had to teach the next morning. That's who I thought I married. That's who I wanted to see. So, I ignored the way his eyes lingered on Emily that day. I told myself I was imagining it. At first, having her around felt like a blessing. She cooked dinner most nights, and not just quick meals, real, thoughtful dishes. The kind of meals our mom used to make when we were kids. Pot roast, lasagna from scratch, lemon chicken with roasted potatoes. I would come home after a 12-hour day, exhausted, and the house would be warm, inviting, filled with the smells of garlic and herbs. Laundry was folded. Floor swept. It was like having a live-in helper, and I convinced myself this was a good thing. Maybe Emily needed this sense of purpose. Maybe this would finally bring us closer. But beneath the surface, small cracks were forming, cracks I refused to see until they became impossible to ignore. It started with the comments, little things, said with a smile, but designed to sting. "Coffee, Derek," Emily would say, placing a perfectly brewed cup in front of him at breakfast. "Black, just how you like it. Robin always makes it too sweet, doesn't she?" Derek would chuckle, looking over at me like it was all harmless. I laughed, too. At first. Or I'd walk into the kitchen to find her rearranging everything, moving pots and pans, shifting spices, organizing drawers. "I finally got everything in the right places," she'd say cheerfully. "It was kind of a mess before, but I've got it working so much better now." The underlying message was clear: I wasn't doing enough. I was too busy with my career to be the kind of wife a man like Derek deserved. But I told myself it was all in my head. Emily didn't mean anything by it. She was just helping. But she wasn't just helping. She was inserting herself. Inch by inch. I began to notice subtle changes in Derek. He seemed happier around her, lighter. He started sitting at the kitchen table in the mornings instead of scrolling through his phone in the living room. He laughed more. Not at anything specific, just this easy, relaxed laughter. And it was always with her. I convinced myself this was good. They were getting along. We were all becoming closer as a family. That's what I wanted, right? Then came the clothes. One evening, I came home earlier than expected. I opened the front door and heard laughter, Emily's high, flirtatious giggle. I stepped into the living room, and there she was, leaning against the kitchen counter, wearing shorts so tiny they could have passed for underwear, and a thin tank top that left little to the imagination. Derek sat across from her, grinning, his eyes flicking up and down her body when he thought I wasn't looking. My heart dropped. I forced a smile, but my hands shook as I carried my briefcase to our bedroom. That night, I confronted Emily in the hallway. "What are you wearing?" I asked, trying to sound casual but firm. She looked me up and down, smirking like I was the one being ridiculous. "It's hot." "Relax." Hot. It was October. The house was set to a cool 68 degrees. But I let it go. Again. I let it all go. Because I was scared. Scared of rocking the boat. Scared of being the jealous wife. Scared that maybe, just maybe, I was imagining all of it. But then, there were moments I couldn't explain away. Like the night I walked into the living room and saw them sitting too close on the couch, his hand resting casually on her knee. When they noticed me, he pulled it away so quickly it was like he'd been burned. Or the time I overheard their hushed laughter from the other room, the way it stopped the second I entered. And then there was the way she started using our phrases, things that were sacred to Derek and me. Little inside jokes we'd shared since we were dating. Suddenly, she was saying them to him, making him laugh like she had been part of those moments all along. It was like she was sliding into my place, and I was slowly being pushed to the side. I started feeling like a stranger in my own home. I would come home from work and hesitate before opening the door, unsure of what version of my life I would walk into. Would it be the warm, welcoming home I built, or would it be the version where I felt like an outsider, watching my husband and my sister share something I was no longer a part of? The tension grew thicker, but I bit my tongue until I couldn't anymore. One night, after yet another comment from Emily about how Derek likes his shirts folded a certain way and how she had finally figured it out, I snapped. "Emily, can I talk to you?" Alone. We stepped into the hallway, and I let the words spill out. "These comments, they need to stop. The coffee, the laundry, the kitchen, it's like you're trying to make me feel like I'm not good enough. Like you're better at being here." She laughed, actually laughed in my face. "Oh my God, Robin. You're being so sensitive. I'm helping. You're busy with work. I'm just trying to keep things nice." I stared at her, trying to figure out if she really believed what she was saying, or if she was just that good at playing innocent. I couldn't tell. And that scared me even more. After that, things didn't get better. They got worse. Derek began taking her side more often. If I mentioned her clothes or her tone, he'd sigh and say I was overreacting. "She's family, Robin. She's going through a hard time. Don't make this harder." I felt like I was losing control, not just of my home, but of my marriage. Of my life. The final blow came one night when I brought up Emily finding her own place. "She's not staying here forever, right? She's been here 2 months. Has she started looking for an apartment?" Derek didn't look up from his phone. "She's family. What's the rush? It's nice having her here. We work well together. We. Not us. Not you and me. We. Him and her." That was the moment something shifted in me. The moment I realized I was no longer part of this team Derek loved to talk about. I was on the outside, watching them build something new. Together. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the house apart. But instead, I just nodded and excused myself to our bedroom. And for the first time in my marriage, I cried myself to sleep. Because deep down, I knew. This wasn't my home anymore. What would you have done in my shoes? Comment 333 and let me know. I remember the exact moment my heart shattered. That night, the night I came home early from Phoenix, it's burned into my mind like a scar that will never fully fade. The wine glasses on the coffee table, still half full. Her blouse draped lazily over the banister like a flag staking her claim. The faint sound of music drifting from upstairs, our bedroom. Our sanctuary. And then, when I pushed the door open, everything unraveled. Derek and Emily, tangled in the sheets I had picked out with such care, the ones I had imagined our future children snuggling into on weekend mornings. Their limbs intertwined like this was their home, their life. My breath caught in my throat. It felt like my body stopped working. Emily saw me first. She smiled. It wasn't shock, it wasn't guilt. It was smug. As if she had won something, like this was the final move in a game I hadn't even realized we were playing. "Oh, don't bother explaining," she said casually to Derek. She was bound to find out. Then her hand drifted to her stomach, and she said the words that broke whatever was left of me. "I'm pregnant. Pregnant. With my husband's child. My sister. In my bed. In my house." For a few seconds, I felt like I was outside my body, floating above it all, watching this horrific scene unfold from a distance. Then, I turned and walked out. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry. I left the room, went downstairs, and sat at the kitchen island, the same place I had envisioned us eating breakfast as a family someday. I made myself a coffee, just the way I liked it, extra sweet, the way Emily had mocked. Derek came down an hour later, face pale and eyes bloodshot. He started to speak, but I held up my hand. "I don't want to hear it," I said, my voice calm but cold. "Not now." I saw the relief flash across his face. He thought I was giving him time to fix this, to manipulate me into staying. He didn't realize I was already making plans. Because in that moment, sitting in my kitchen, drinking my coffee, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I was going to take everything back. And I was going to do it on my terms. The next morning, I woke up before either of them. I showered, dressed, and went to work like it was any other day. But everything had changed. Every smile I gave my coworkers, every call I took, every meeting I led, it was all part of the mask I wore now. Inside, I was seething. But I buried it so deep even I could barely feel it. Derek and Emily acted like nothing had happened. He was overly sweet, trying to charm his way back into my good graces. Emily was practically glowing, fluttering around the house like a queen bee. She knew she had Derek wrapped around her finger. And she thought she had me beat. But what neither of them realized was that I was watching. Listening. Every detail, every slip of the tongue, every whispered conversation when they thought I was in the shower, I catalogued it all like evidence in a trial. I started gathering documents. Quietly. Methodically. I pulled out the mortgage papers, the deed to the house, the car title. Every financial record, proof that every penny tied to this life was mine. I made copies, scanning them to my work email, storing the originals in a locked drawer at the office. I wasn't going to let them turn this house into their love nest while I was forced to start over. No. They would leave with nothing. I called my lawyer, Barbara, discreetly. I told her everything. She was the kind of woman who had seen it all, and she didn't flinch. "We'll prepare the divorce papers, but don't serve them yet," she advised. "Not until you're ready." So I waited. Every morning, I kissed Derek goodbye before work. Every evening, I smiled politely at Emily's little digs. Every night, I slept beside the man who had shattered my heart, knowing it was only temporary. I knew their weaknesses. Derek was terrified of looking like a failure, especially to his parents. He had built this image of himself as the provider, the successful husband. If they found out he had been leeching off me for years, his pride would crumble. And Emily? She had always relied on others to clean up her messes. She needed a comfortable life handed to her. The idea of being broke, pregnant, and alone was her worst nightmare. So, I leaned into their egos. I acted understanding. Supportive. I let Derek believe I was working through my feelings. I let Emily think I had accepted her place in my home, our home. You need stability now, with the baby coming, I said to her one day, watching her eyes light up with relief. She thought she had one. But in reality, I was setting the stage. I started slowly reclaiming the house, too. I rearranged rooms, moving their things into smaller spaces under the guise of making room for the baby. I started locking the door to my home office. I told Derek it was because I had confidential client documents, which was true, but it also gave me a private sanctuary they couldn't touch. I paid off the remaining balance on the mortgage, draining one of my savings accounts to do it. It was a move of finality, a reminder to myself that this house was mine. Always had been. Always would be. The final piece came when I reached out to Martha and George. I invited them over for dinner, just the two of them. I needed to plant the seed. We sat around the same dining table where Derek had once lied about buying the house. I smiled through every bite, every laugh, until I casually said, Derek and I have been discussing the baby. We just want to make sure Emily has support. You know, since she and Derek have been so close. The color drained from Martha's face. George's fork clattered to his plate. They didn't say much after that. They didn't need to. I knew the wheels were turning. Derek was furious when he found out I'd told them. He accused me of stirring up drama. But I played the hurt wife perfectly. I thought we were all family, I said softly. I was just trying to prepare them. For the baby. He had no response. Because what could he say? After that, everything was in place. All I needed was to pull the trigger. I stood in my kitchen one night, sipping that sweet coffee, staring out at the backyard I had dreamed about filling with children's laughter. And I realized something. This was my life. My dream. My home. They had tried to steal it from me. But they had underestimated me. They were the ones who would lose everything. Have you ever had to stay silent while planning your next move? Comment 444 if you know that feeling. The day I took my life back didn't start with fireworks or some dramatic confrontation. It began like any other, quiet, ordinary. That's what made it all the more satisfying. The downfall of the people who betrayed me unfolded not with a shout, but with a slow, crushing inevitability. And I orchestrated every second of it. That morning, I brewed my coffee, extra sweet, just the way I liked it. I stood in my kitchen, looking out over the backyard I had once imagined our future children playing in. I felt calm. Steady. For the first time in months, I was no longer drowning. I was holding the rope that would pull me back to shore, and I was ready to let it tighten around their necks. I had given them every chance to be decent. I had swallowed my pride, bit my tongue until it bled, and endured their smug smiles under my roof, my roof. They thought my silence was weakness. They mistook my patience for defeat. But they forgot who I was. I had built this life with my own two hands. I had fought for every dollar in my bank account, every piece of furniture in this house, every brick and tile. And no one was going to take it from me. When I told Derek and Emily we needed to have a talk, they thought they'd won. I saw it in the way Emily smirked, her hand drifting casually to her stomach. Derek sat next to her, tense but cocky, like he believed I was about to beg him to stay. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. We sat in the living room, the very space where they had hosted their little secret romance under my nose. I looked around and felt nothing but cold determination. This was no longer a home filled with dreams. It was a battleground. I've been thinking about the future, I started, keeping my voice soft, measured. With the baby coming, things are going to change. We need to be realistic. Emily's eyes gleamed with triumph. She thought I was conceding. Derek relaxed, his posture shifting as if he'd dodged a bullet. I agree, he said quickly. We can make this work, Robin. We're all family. Family. That word tasted like poison in my mouth. I nodded, playing the part. That's why I wanted to clear a few things up. There seems to be some confusion about this house. Emily leaned forward, eager. Oh, we don't have to worry about any of that right now. Derek took care of everything. I smiled, sweetly, deceptively. Did he? That's interesting. Because I have the paperwork right here. I reached into the folder I had prepared and laid the documents on the coffee table, the mortgage, the deed, the car title. Proof. Unshakable, undeniable proof. Every signature. Every payment. Every cent mine, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. Derek's face drained of color. Emily's smirk flickered, then vanished. What is this? She stammered. This is reality, Emily, I said coolly. This house? Mine. That car you two have been driving around in like a happy little couple? Also mine. The furniture you've been lounging on while you planned your perfect little life? Every single piece, mine. I leaned back, enjoying the way their facade crumbled. You lied to me, Emily snapped at Derek, her voice high and shrill. She turned on him, fists balling. You said this was yours. You said we were going to raise our baby here. Derek tried to speak, but nothing came out. He looked like he might be sick. The shame, the humiliation, it was swallowing him whole. And I let it. I just wanted to, he started. Save it, I interrupted. I don't care why you lied. I don't care about either of you. What I care about is you getting the hell out of my house. Emily's mouth fell open. But I'm pregnant. Her voice trembled, and for a brief moment, I saw the girl I grew up with, the little sister who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. But that girl was gone. The woman standing in front of me had slept with my husband in my bed and had the audacity to claim my home as her own. Not my problem, I said, my tone sharp. You have 1 hour. Pack your things and leave. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. Derek tried to plead. Robin, please, let's talk about this. 55 minutes now, I cut him off. After that, I'm calling the police. And trust me, they'll have no problem escorting you both out. Panic set in. Emily screamed at Derek, calling him useless and pathetic. She threw a pillow at him, then turned to me, eyes blazing. You'll regret this, she hissed. I met her gaze without blinking. Get out. They scrambled. It was chaos, bags being stuffed, drawers yanked open, curses exchanged between them. Emily cried, Derek muttered apologies to no one in particular, and I just stood there. Watching. Taking it all in. This was their downfall. And it was glorious. Exactly 58 minutes later, they dragged their luggage out to Emily's beat-up car. I stood on the porch, my porch, arms crossed, watching them load their things. Derek couldn't even look at me. Emily paused before getting into the car. Her face was streaked with mascara, but her eyes were still hard. You think you're better than me, she spat. But you're going to end up alone. Miserable. You always were. I smiled. Goodbye, Emily. They drove off. I waited until their car disappeared down the street before I stepped back inside. I locked the door, double-checked it, then went to the kitchen. I made another cup of coffee, extra sweet. I sat at the island, listening to the silence. For the first time in months, my house felt like mine again. Relief washed over me, but it was mixed with something deeper, something stronger. Power. I had taken back what was mine. I had shown them both that I was not to be underestimated. Later that night, my phone rang. It was my mother. I didn't answer. I already knew what she would say, how I was cruel, how Emily was pregnant, how I needed to be the bigger person. But I had been the bigger person my entire life. I was done. When I finally went to bed, alone, in fresh sheets that I had bought that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Do you think they got what they deserved? Comment 555 if you felt that justice was served. The morning after Derek and Emily drove away from my house, I woke up to a stillness I hadn't felt in months. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't wake up bracing myself, wondering what passive-aggressive comment Emily would make over coffee, or if Derek would look at me with that quiet guilt he thought he hid so well. I didn't have to share my space with people who had treated me like an afterthought in my own life. I was alone. But I was free. That first day, I moved through the house differently. My bare feet against the cool hardwood floors felt like I was reclaiming territory. I opened windows, letting in fresh air to cleanse the spaces they had tainted. I stripped the bed where I had found them, ripping the sheets off with a kind of vengeance that felt both ridiculous and necessary. I stuffed everything into a garbage bag. Sheets, pillows, even the towels they'd used. I drove straight to the dump. I didn't want those things anywhere near me. I came back home, opened my laptop, and started browsing for new bedding. Then it turned into new curtains. Then new paint samples. Before I knew it, I was planning an entire home refresh. It wasn't just about getting rid of their presence, it was about making this space truly mine. Every corner, every color, every piece of furniture would reflect me. No compromises. No shared decisions. Just me. That night, I slept on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, because my bedroom was empty. And even though it should have felt sad or pathetic, it didn't. It felt like a beginning. The call started the next day. My mom. Then my dad. Over and over. I let them go to voicemail, but I knew what was coming. When I finally answered, my mother's voice was sharp, already filled with judgment. Robin, what are you thinking? You can't just throw your pregnant sister out onto the street. She's your family. The word family was a weapon she had wielded against me my entire life. It was her trump card, her way of making me bend, sacrifice, give up pieces of myself for Emily. Because that's what I had always done. I was the responsible one, the strong one. Emily was the fragile one who needed protecting. That was the story we all played into. Not anymore. She slept with my husband, Mom. She tried to take my home. I owe her nothing. There was a pause. Then, in that clipped tone I knew so well, she said, well, maybe you should let them have the house. You're successful. You can get another place. Emily's pregnant, she needs stability. You don't have children to think about. That hit harder than I expected. The way she brushed aside my life, my work, my pain, because I wasn't a mother. As if my success meant I could afford to be stripped of what I built. As if my sacrifices mattered less, because I didn't have a baby growing inside me. My voice was steady, but cold. No. Her breath caught. Robin. I said no. It was the first time I had ever truly denied her. There was no apology. No compromise. Just a wall. Then you're choosing this house over your family, she spat. I'm choosing myself, I corrected her. She hung up. That night, I blocked her number. And my father's. And Emily's. I knew what this meant. I was being cut off. I was the villain now, the selfish sister, the cold-hearted daughter. They would rally around Emily and Derek, spin their narrative. I could already picture them crowded into my childhood home, comforting her, painting me as the cruel, ungrateful one. Let them. For weeks, I buried myself in work. I took on more clients, closed bigger deals. The Anderson contract had been just the beginning. With Derek and Emily out of my life, my focus sharpened. I was relentless. I worked late into the nights, but this time it didn't feel like I was running from something. It felt like I was running towards something, my future, on my terms. I paid off the remainder of my mortgage within 2 months. Signing that final payment, knowing that this house, every inch of it, was mine, free and clear, was a quiet victory. There was no applause. No one to celebrate with. Just me, sitting at my kitchen island with a glass of wine, staring at the deed. But that silence felt like peace. The house transformed slowly, room by room. I painted the bedroom a deep, rich blue, nothing like the neutral tones Derek had preferred. I replaced the bed with a sleek, modern frame that I chose purely because I loved it. I bought art that spoke to me, pieces that I would never have picked with someone else's opinion in the room. I planted flowers in the garden out back, bright, wild colors that made me smile when I looked out the window. The more the house became mine, the more I felt like I was reclaiming myself. I started cooking again, not because I had to, but because I enjoyed it. I experimented with recipes, made a mess in my kitchen, and danced to music while sipping wine. I remembered what it felt like to enjoy my own company. But it wasn't all perfect. There were nights I cried, curled up on that beautiful new bed. Nights when I thought about what I had lost, not just Derek, but the future I thought we were building together. The kids we talked about. The Sunday mornings with pancakes and cartoons. That version of my life was gone. And I had to grieve it, even if I knew it was built on lies. There were times I missed Emily, too. As toxic as our relationship had been, she was still my sister. We had shared a childhood. We had whispered secrets under blankets and held hands at our grandmother's funeral. There were parts of her I loved deeply. But love didn't mean I had to let her destroy me. The hardest part was realizing that family, the people who should have stood by me, chose her. But maybe they had always chosen her. Maybe I had just refused to see it until now. One afternoon, months later, I came home from work, and for the first time, I didn't feel that ache when I opened the door. I didn't brace myself for anything. I was just home. I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, extra sweet, and watched the sunset. I thought about how different my life looked from what I had planned. And for the first time, I realized that was okay. Because this life, this house, this peace, I built it. I chose it. I chose myself. Sometimes, choosing yourself means losing people you love. Sometimes it means standing alone. But standing alone is better than standing in a house built on betrayal. I was no longer the woman who let others write her story. I was writing my own. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love to protect yourself? Comment 666 if you've made that choice. There's a certain kind of heartbreak that changes you. It's not the kind that makes you cry yourself to sleep for a few nights and then move on. It's the kind that cracks you open from the inside, leaving you raw and exposed. The kind that forces you to confront everything you believed about love, loyalty, and family, and accept that some of it was a lie. That's the kind of heartbreak I went through. But here's what they don't tell you, it's also the kind that makes you stronger. Stronger than you ever thought you could be. When Derek and Emily betrayed me, it wasn't just about my husband cheating or my sister's betrayal. It was the realization that, for so much of my life, I had been sacrificing parts of myself to keep other people comfortable. I had bent over backward to be the good wife, the dependable daughter, the accommodating sister. I had believed that if I gave enough, if I proved my worth through my success and my kindness, the people I loved would cherish me back. But that's not how it works. You can give everything you have, your money, your home, your trust, and still be left with nothing. Because people who only know how to take will never see your worth. They will just see what they can get. That was the hardest truth I had to face. But once I did, I realized something even more important. I was worth more than what I had been given. I deserved more than a husband who needed me to shrink so he could feel big. I deserved more than a sister who saw my life as something to steal. I deserved more than parents who only valued me when I was sacrificing for someone else. I deserved happiness, peace, freedom. Choosing myself wasn't easy. It meant walking away from people I had loved my whole life. It meant standing in the wreckage of the future I had planned and deciding to build something new. It meant facing the fear of being alone and realizing that being alone is far better than being surrounded by people who make you feel small. And in choosing myself, I found my power. I rebuilt my home, not just the walls and the rooms, but the feeling of it. I made it mine, in every way. I filled it with colors I loved, with laughter that belonged to me alone. I sat in my garden with my coffee, watching the sunset, and I realized that this quiet, simple peace, was what I had been craving all along. But more than that, I rebuilt me. I stood up and said, I deserve better. And I meant it. That's what I want you to take from my story. Because I know I'm not alone. I know some of you have given everything to people who didn't deserve it. I know some of you have been betrayed by those you trusted most. And I know some of you feel like if you walk away, you'll be left with nothing. But I promise you, you will not be left with nothing. You will be left with you. And that is everything. Sometimes, the family you're born into isn't the family you need to keep. Sometimes, the person you need to save is yourself. And that's not selfish. It's survival. Have you ever had to fight to reclaim your power? I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if you felt my pain, my anger, my triumph, let me know by hitting that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And most importantly, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, we all need a reminder. You are worth more than what they gave you. And you have the power to take your life back.